Very good morning and welcome for the first day of Arab Aviation Summit 2022. It's my pleasure to welcome you guys in our first day of works. My special thanks for you all that are here present on this very important day where content will be amazing. It's been a long journey with the committee to make this content available for you guys. I hope that you can enjoy it. Special thanks, not to be too long, to our strategic partners. Without them, it was literally impossible to be here in this beautiful place, beautiful and safe Ras Al Khaimah, RAK TDA, Airbus, Air Arabia, CFM, Turkish Technique, RAK Chamber, and Collins Aerospace. Thank you all for your support. Thanking you all for making this possible. We're gonna start immediately with our first presenter. So we're going to have a global insight regarding Global Passenger Survey 2021, very useful for us to understand the trends of the future. And we will have online today this new things of hybrid events. Today is online, tomorrow Kashif will be here. It's my pleasure to introduce you online. Kashif Khalid is the Regional Director of Africa and Middle East from IATA. His responsibility goes for airports and aviation strategy. Enjoy your day, and don't forget that we have lunch here, and at the end of the day, we have a sunset network at Hilton Gardens Inn. We have a shuttle here to go to Hilton Gardens around 5. It's a beautiful sunset here in Ras Al Khaimah. And now, yes, I will leave you with Kashif. Have a good day. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. And on behalf of IATA, I would like to thank the organizers of the Arab Aviation Summit for giving us the opportunity to present our latest survey highlights from a passenger perspective. Just in terms of setting the scene, our industry has been greatly affected by the COVID pandemic and more recently geopolitical issues affecting not only Europe and the Russian continent, but the vast majority of the world. What we wanted to do is set the scene in terms of giving the audience an overview as to what the passengers want, both post-pandemic and as we head towards that period of recovery. So in summary, from our GPS survey, which we launched in November or December 2021, passengers want to travel more. This is something that we've learned from conducting a survey of over 10,000 respondents from all geographies around the world. And just over 3/4 of them mentioned that they've experienced a reduction in the quality of life due to travel restrictions. Now, this is coming from both business travelers as well as leisure holiday makers, but also passengers that would be categorized as VFR or visiting friends and relative. There's no surprise that we went from the travel experience being somewhat, let's say, challenging to quite cumbersome. And as global borders started shutting down, the travel industry brought in additional protocols and health measures. Just by way of example, pre-pandemic, when a passenger was undertaking travel, an airline or check-in agent had to verify their passport, visa information, and then they would go through the passenger process. But what we saw during the middle of the pandemic was not only did airlines and aviation stakeholders have to verify a traveler's passport and visa credentials, but there were approximately between 8 to 11 additional data elements. So passengers' travel history, had they been to a country which was facing an outbreak of the COVID pandemic, did they have the right contact tracing information? What sort of PCR requirements exist? Were there any additional requirements for contact tracing forms or passenger locator forms, as well as any prepayments when it comes to quarantine or any additional health protocols, or if they needed to fill out an application online for the government or download an application. So the travel industry went through a period of rapid change, and what we got back from our passengers was that they're experiencing a reduction in the quality of life due to these restrictions. Many of our passengers did come back and say that they're flying less due to the difficulty in traveling. And as we always say, passengers aren't afraid to travel, they're afraid to get stuck. And this is what we witnessed with passengers looking at the vetting regulations across the world and then deciding whether they wanted to travel or not. But generally, Despite all of these travel restrictions, the outlook was extremely positive. Passengers did say that despite these restrictions and as they see these measures easing, they want to travel more frequently. What we'd like to do in this presentation is highlight some of those key themes that we got back from the survey. So in the initial months, we saw that there was a lot of apprehension around passengers traveling because they didn't want to be sitting next to someone that was infected. The industry did a great job, both with the work done by ICAO, ACI, IATA, on the CART recommendations, but also using medical evidence and research to signify how safe travel was by airlines using HEPA filters, but also the orientation of passengers facing forward. There was no study or research which highlighted that your risk profile increased if you were traveling on an airplane. In fact, you were more likely to contract COVID in a normal setting as opposed to the travel experience. In addition to that, many passengers were quite worried about using or coming into contact with high surface areas such as toilet facilities or F&B. And then over a quarter of passengers were quite concerned about the additional hygiene and cleaning requirements throughout COVID. But I have to say that not only airlines in the region, but global airlines did a great job in terms of building confidence in passengers by upgrading the hygiene, sanitization, and cleaning protocols, using PPE for not only for staff, but also for passengers, ensuring that frontline workers such as cabin crew and airline crew were fully vaccinated, but also reducing the risk and further building confidence in the system by offering additional insurance, PCR testing mechanism, as well as building confidence within the ecosystem. Now, as we move out of the pandemic, what are some of the measures post-pandemic that passengers want? A clear one was vaccine certificates prior to travel, developing digital solutions to manage those credentials, and increase efforts in sanitizing public spaces, namely airports and other touch points. And it's important to mention the first two, since we firmly believe from an IATA perspective that they're here to stay. In recent weeks, global governments are easing travel restrictions by removing PCR requirements prior to travel and focusing more on vaccine certifications. PCR testing will be available for passengers that don't have a vaccine certificate, but what we're seeing in line with WHO recommendations is that governments will enable passengers without the need for PCR if they have the right vaccine endorsed by the WHO and if they're boosted. But managing vaccine credentials requires not only digital applications, but the ability for stakeholders in the ecosystem to validate those credentials, whether it's airlines, check-in agents, ground handlers, or airports. And there's a multitude of solutions out there. And one of the solutions that we've been working within IATA is known as Travel Pass, which not only vets your PCR or vaccine certification, but also gives you the most up-to-date travel requirements and enables contactless solutions for a passenger to submit their data pre-travel. If I zoom in on the passenger profile that we surveyed, we ensured that more than 70% of those passengers did travel throughout the COVID pandemic. So we're getting an accurate response of where the industry is and what are some of the challenges, as well as a demographic breakdown by regions, but also in terms of male-female population. I have to be transparent that the vast majority of the respondents did come from Europe and Asia Pacific. And why we felt it was important to spend more time in Asia Pacific was, unlike areas in Africa, Middle East, which relatively were open in terms of border measures, Asia Pacific still was somewhat restricted when it comes to travel protocols. So we wanted to voice a lot of the challenges being faced by the Asia Pacific passengers. Interestingly, one of the most important elements that we got back from the industry was that passengers are quite interested in sharing their biometric data if it means faster airport processing. This includes advanced passenger information, potentially biometrics, as well as data that can be used to facilitate various touch points throughout their journey, whether it's check-in, immigration, security, or airports that have self-boarding. And there were a couple of pain points that passengers came back with. And no surprise, security, immigration, and boarding tends to be the top three areas where passengers do come back and say, that there's a room for improvement. But within the Middle East region, and more importantly in the United Arab Emirates, we see not only the airlines, but the airports actually leading the league tables when it comes to faster facilitation and processing. If we summarize all of the touch points where passengers came back, comparing it to pre-pandemic levels, the blue line shows you where satisfaction currently is in 2021 versus 2019 levels in the dotted blue line versus dissatisfaction. So as you can see, the vast majority of respondents are quite satisfied with the booking and the airport processes. One of the areas that it's important to mention is check-in. Throughout the pandemic, what many of us in the industry don't appreciate is that the various processes for passengers to check in, such as mobile kiosks and off-airport activities, were suspended due to the need for airlines to verify your PCR, your vaccine certificate. So essentially, all passengers were being checked in traditionally using a desk, which had an additional burden on the airlines, but also in terms of airport capacity and how these passengers would be processed. No surprise, security and immigration were still relatively straightforward. But where we saw passengers being dissatisfied was the onboard experience as a result of additional health measures, and then also the passport, border control, and immigration. And there's a couple of reasons for that, because many governments globally were coupling the health protocols along with the immigration or border control process, so that led to additional processing time, especially in countries like the Far East, some countries in Europe, and then North America as well. In our 2021 survey, what we also did was, besides conducting our regular passenger survey, we had a focus on passengers with reduced mobility and bringing in their response to what more the industry can do. Generally, where the passengers with reduced mobility wanted more effort or emphasis by the stakeholders was at the airport processes, which we call 3 to 5. So typically from backdrop, security, and boarding is where most of the passengers experienced challenges. But overall, from a PRM perspective, compared to 2019 levels, we have seen that airports and airlines in the region are faring better than in the Middle East region than other peers, whether it's in Asia Pacific or North America. A key theme that we see, as mentioned earlier, is that biometrics is gaining momentum. A lot of airlines, airports, and governments in the industry are focusing on the contactless element for travel. And it is with that, we firmly believe that programs such as IATA One ID, but also other cross-border programs and biometric facilitation are going to gain momentum. And as mentioned, passengers are willing to provide their information, provided it leads to a better experience at the airport. And with pilot programs that we have in the Middle East region, and I'm pleased to say 3 of those programs are in the United Arab Emirates, working in partnership with member airlines, airports, and immigration authorities, we see the use of biometrics catching on for passengers to be able to complete processes such as check-in, immigration, and very soon in the near future, self-boarding as well. So top 3 touch points globally for biometric usage. Entry and exit immigration roughly represents approximately 50% of that use. And what we're starting to see is many governments using biometrics to enable their risk-based security screening initiatives across airports as well. And what we're seeing is that nearly 86% of passengers are quite satisfied with the overall process. For people that are domiciled in the UAE or travel often in and out of the airports, if you're using some of the biometric or electronic gates, you understand how easy and convenient it is versus a traditional queuing desk. And for passengers that have used solutions flying, whether it's out of Dubai or Abu Dhabi, you're beginning to see airlines enroll passengers in biometric facilitation programs. And you can use the same token for clearing immigration of your backdrop, but also gaining access to the premium lounges. And in certain cases, for select flights, you can actually self-board using these biometric tokens as well. So again, no surprise that 88% of passengers are willing to share data with not only immigration authorities, but also bolt on the health credentials if it expedites the process at the airport. And this is one of the mantras that we kept in mind while designing the use of IATA Travel Pass, is for passengers to be able to share that data with airlines, airports, immigration authorities, or pre-clearing a portion of their travel if it means them having a better experience at the airport. But also what we found interesting is that more than half of those same passengers are willing for that same biometric data to be shared securely with other ecosystem providers within the travel industry, such as hotels, car rental facilities, or even cruise ships, so that they don't need to necessarily provide that data. And this is the area where we feel which is quite exciting, because apart from the aviation industry, we could use those same biometric tokens for enabling passengers to get straight access to their hotel rooms, to board their cruise ships, to pre-clear immigration, but also have the ability to use biometrics at various touch points as well. And it opens up a world for us to not only map the passenger's journey, but also unite them with their baggage once we look at off-airport baggage services as well. No surprise that passengers are concerned about data. And from an IATA perspective, it's important that, A, we comply with the global regulations, but it's important to build that confidence in the passengers that are traveling, that their data is secure, it's free from interference, and it's not being handled, stored, or reviewed by any authority that's not allowed to see that data. So one of the principles, for example, for IATA Travel Pass it was based on decentralized technology, where the data always remains on a passenger's phone or device, and only with the passenger's consent can their biometric data be shared with a government authority that requests it. No surprise, passengers want more dwell time at the airport. Baggage is still an area where passengers are not comfortable with in many markets, predominantly in Europe and North America, where they prefer to travel with carry-on baggage and have the least dwell time at the airport for business trips. But within the region, in the Middle East region, what we see is that passengers are confident in the airline's ability to unite them with their bag. They want greater dwell time and less stress at the airport. And it's ultimately important for the airports to have that dwell time for passengers, because the less time they're standing in queues, whether it's for check-in, immigration, security, that dwell time gives them the ability to spend on commercial offerings such as duty-free or F&B, which trickles back to the airport authority or the government. Just in terms of summarizing, what are some of the pain points or where passengers responded, where we need to improve? No surprise, as mentioned earlier, that security queuing tends to be a process bottleneck. Not as much a concern in the Middle East region as it is in North America and capacity-constrained airports in Europe. But within our region, boarding tends to be where most of the challenges are, along with immigration. Last but not least, passengers traveling with bags have asked for the industry to focus on, again, looking at the ability for passengers to track their bags, apart from just being given a token, to be reconciled with their bags at the end of the journey. So one of the programs that we launched a couple of years ago was looking at RFID technology, and we are more likely to see airlines and GSPs focusing more on the ability to track and trace passenger bags. A growing segment for the industries where passengers have the ability to complete their processes off-site, and a clear segment of that is the baggage services. Why do passengers have to travel and be reunited with their bags at the airport, let's say, nodes? Many of our passengers have come back to say they're more than happy to part ways with their bags off-site if there's a collection mechanism or a sterile corridor. And then as long as their bag can be delivered in a timely manner at their final destination, they're more than happy to be able to pass on that responsibility, provided that they're kept informed and they have the ability to track where their bag is using an application or an alerting system. And interestingly, in the Middle East region, we're starting to see GSPs, but also airlines start to look at off-airport processing for bags. And it's a segment that we firmly believe is going to catch on quite quickly. Yeah, and just building upon that, we've seen passengers also traveling for business recommend that it's possible that bag services could be facilitated at a hotel, at a conference center, meeting or conventions, so that passengers don't have to lug around their luggage. They're given more flexibility, and it also builds for a stronger ecosystem in terms of off-airport processing. And again, the Middle East and Africa region fared much stronger than some of our other regions where passengers are looking for these services. As mentioned, passengers want the ability to track their bags and delivery times. We still believe mishandled bags is one of the challenges that the industry faces for a variety of reasons. And we're quite pleased with initiatives such as Resolution 753, Baggage RFID, that airlines are working on the track and traceability for passengers to be united with their bags, but also understand where in the ecosystem that bag has been misplaced, if it was. Coming back to passengers with reduced mobility, 11% of respondents sought assistance for themselves or someone else while traveling in the last 2 years. Overall, most of them came back to say that they were satisfied with the service. The airlines and the airports are doing a great job in terms of providing those special assistance, whether it's wheelchairs, security handling, or other elements for PRNs. But the industry generally could do better to meet the assistance of special needs. And over 80% felt that special assistance services provided to them were seamless and without any fault. In terms of IATA, if you're interested in more information from a global perspective on our passenger survey, whether it's looking at booking, airport processes, immigration, or some of the new initiatives that we're working on, such as biometric facilitation at the airports, we'd be more than happy to engage with your stakeholder or authority and work with our airline partners to ensure that as we recover from the pandemic, that travel is not only seamless, but it's a pleasurable experience for all in the ecosystem. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone on behalf of IATA, and once again, my sincere appreciation to the organizers of the Arab Aviation Summit. Thank you so much.